Sarah, I'm so looking forward to our interview. You talk about something that's really so important considering we've been such a male-dominated society for so long. And you really touch on what I love. I'm just going to read something from your webpage that I loved. You said, I'm obsessed with guiding women to shine their brightest, share their gifts, and live a passionate, purpose-driven life. And you've created a sacred space for women to connect and to radiate. I love that. I love that connecting and radiating versus competing. So welcome to my podcast, and thank you so much for coming on to share what you do.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I love what you do. Thank you for everything that you do for women and men in the world. So I'm excited to be here today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, let's just begin at the beginning. Who are you? Tell us a little bit about you, my audience a little bit about you. They've heard your bio, but it's always nice hearing it from you. Tell us something special about you, something that isn't in your bio, what your bio is, but maybe something that isn't in your bio. And why do you do what you do?
Okay. So I feel like I've always known what I wanted to do. I believe that all of us have, but then of course, society and all the things that we go through can sometimes take us off track. And ultimately, we end up back on the journey where we were supposed to be. So I believe that everything happens for a reason and happens for you. And I think at least the earliest memory that I have was about knowing what I wanted to do was when I was 5. I would line up all my stuffed animals and be speaking to them and wanting to know their feelings and all of these different things. Yeah. And then my dad was an entrepreneur. So I kind of watched how he did things. And then at the age of 5, I had gone through some trauma. So from 5 to 18, I was just trying to make it in the world. And though my heart always, everything that I've gone through, I have literally put me where I am today. So I have compassion for everything, and I'm proud of the person that I am. And so for, your teenage years, those are already hard years to begin with, but having gone through assault and some abuse, I just had gone off track of what I wanted to do, but I always knew that I wanted to support women, and everything that I had gone through just made that stronger and made that fire inside. But I knew I needed to start with myself. So I actually was hey, I want to be able to help people. I also want to learn as to how to get through my own trauma and my own healing. And so I went to school to be a psychologist, and I was going through getting my master's, and I was going to get my PhD, and I decided not to. And because my whole life I'd been doing what everyone else had told me to do. And so there was just something inside me that was move to LA. Made no sense. I mean, I loved school. I had a plan. Move to LA and you will find what you need there. So I actually had dropped out of school, moved to LA, and started these women's groups and just really married all my passions, which was charity work, psychology, and just supporting women. And I created this brand called Girl Talk and just started doing these women's events everywhere and just really bringing women together to talk about things that we really needed in the mindset of supporting each other rather than competing with each other. And so that's kind of brought me to where I am today and writing my first book, Beautifully Brave, and everything that I do. And I know you said, tell me something that's not in your bio, but I think that just the own trauma and my own journey, even though I talk about it, it was something that has really brought me to, like I said, where I am today, and even has given me the confidence and the bravery to do anything that I do, even though it was absolutely terrible what I had gone through as a child.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry that you went through that. I don't know how much, if you wanted to go into any depth anymore, you're more than welcome. But you obviously went through reconceptualizing and dealing with that and reprocessing. A lot of what I teach is helping people to years as a therapist and a clinical neuroscientist type therapist is helping people to get to the root core of their issues and deconstruct and reconstruct. And I always use, where's my trees? I always use these tree analogies to help people understand thoughts being trees and, deconstructing them. So you've taken your experience and you've turned it around as a passion to help women. And that transition was a major thing for you. And it obviously happened over you skipped over from 5 to where you are at today quite quickly as an introduction. But do you feel comfortable going back and talking a little bit about how you got to this where you are today in a little bit more depth? Because I think that helps people a lot, because so many people, it's way too often that people are abused, as we both know. And it's just, the numbers are terrible, and women don't talk about it because of our male-dominated patriarchal society that's been going on for way too long. And I'm a lot older than you, and things have changed dramatically than compared to what they were, but it's still, it's still not right. And so I don't know if you want to speak to any of that. If I've triggered anything, I just would love you to share.
Yeah. So there's
triggered
a lot.
in a good sense.
So
triggered in a good sense, not in a bad sense.
Triggered in a good way. So when I was 5, I actually was sexually assaulted from a babysitter. So I don't want to like speed through things, but that happened to me when I was 5. And then again, when I was 10, a family member attempted to, but I was older at that age and I knew that it was wrong. And in a way, even though you're still so young at 10, 11 years old, I got out of the situation and I told someone right away. And then when I was 18, out on my own, going off to school, and I lived in a family where everyone just did their best. And I know how loved I was, but there was a lot of, the patriarchy that we are talking about and that old mindset. And half of my family was Italian and they just didn't know what to do with a woman that wanted to be on her own and didn't want to do these normal society rules that we were used to. So as for all the things that had happened to me growing up and living in that and just knowing that's not for me, like I'm not traditional that way. And I also want to stand up, have women have a voice. So I was so excited to go off to school because for me, school meant independence. It meant getting out of the environment that I didn't have like any control of during those years. So when I went to school and I was like around 18 or 19, I was raped. So I have had just from a very throughout my journey, a lot of experiences with this, with, the unhealthy masculine and everything that happened. Those 2 experiences when I was 10 and 19, I processed on my own and just did as much healing as I did. Cause like you said, I had told the experience when I was 10, but when I was 18, 19, going off to school and I was at a party, it was all those things that, was that my fault? Did I put myself in that situation? Yeah. So then I spent those few years. And when I came to LA, I think that's why that voice inside of me, because it was like, yes, you're going to do something really big, but you're also going to find a lot of healing in this. Because everyone was like, you're insane. You're about to go and get your PhD and have a secure job and all the things, and you're going to leave it all and go to LA. But that was the best decision I ever made because that helped me process what happened to me when I was 18 and 19. And as I built Girl Talk and as I was supporting other women and bringing women in community, I was healing myself.
Wow. So it was reaching out to others in that process. There's an interesting statistic. I don't know if you've ever seen the study where if you're in the midst of your pain, one of the quickest ways of improving your healing is to help others. And that's by a 68+% factor that when we reach out, it doesn't mean that you can't get help, obviously, but in helping others, you help yourself by an increased factor of 68%. So you demonstrate that so clearly so you went to LA and you immediately started these girl groups. How did you do that? What do they look like? What do you mean?
Yeah. So when I went to LA, I just noticed, like I said, the mindset that I wanted to do a lot of different things. I wanted to marry my passions. I wanted to marry all the things that I was an expert per se. But I didn't know anyone in LA. And I at that time, there's so many amazing entrepreneurs around the world and people around the world. But at the time and in LA, I didn't know anyone that was I didn't know anyone that thought the same way that I did or wanted to have the conversations that you and I are having right now. I'd always had those conversations on my own or with a therapist, never with my community. So I was like, if I feel this way, and for everyone that's listening, obviously feels a certain way about something or wants to start something and they're holding off. And if you want to start it and you can't stop thinking about it, then for me, I take that as a sign that there's other people out there like you that need that same thing.
Oh, that's amazing. What a way of saying it. That's really beautiful.
Yeah. So that's then incredible. Thank you. So then I was like, I feel like it was the scariest time to start a business, absolutely knowing nothing of starting a women's group, but it was also the easiest time because I was in such passion and determination. And like you said, I don't know that I realized it at the time, but I was healing.
Yeah, you were healing. So you felt and you knew what you needed. There was this, you followed your instinct, you followed your intuition, you followed that inner core of who you are, your aliveness. I call that, I call that the mind. You followed your wired for love nature. Yeah. And it drove you and you tuned into yourself, which is powerful because that's not easy when you've been through so much trauma to tune into yourself to that extent and to transition so powerfully. That's incredible.
Yeah. So it's like you said, like your intuition, it was like my second brain. I was like, oh, you need to be here for a reason. And through starting Girl Talk and starting the groups, what I did was I just went around. I started small. I went in my community of Manhattan Beach and went around to different businesses, went around to different women's groups that already existed. I had a lot of no's. I had a lot of people that were literally like, what does women supporting women even mean? Like, or I have enough friends. It makes me laugh to this day, but I just kept going door to door. At that time, I had maybe a few hundred followers. So that's why I love to share this story, because it's like, it doesn't matter how many followers you have. You have a platform, no matter who you are. It's your family is your platform. Your neighbors are your platform. So just go out and talk about what you're passionate about and the difference that you want to make. And you'll just see that the right people, the people that feel that calling to be a part of what you're creating will share how they can support. And it just slowly builds a community.
That's incredible. So so at that, I mean, this is not that long ago. How long ago was this when you went door to door, literally saying, "Hey, I want to create this"?
Yeah, when I went door to door, I think that was in 2015 or 16.
So in a few short years, you have actually created a basically like a movement almost of women helping women. So what does it look like?
Oh my gosh! So the first one was an event. So it's just like, I'm going to have this event. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to have it go for charity for other women that have experienced sexual assault and bullying as well, because I have some stories. Of course, through that, with all the things that have happened, you're going to have some issues in school. So I had issues in school with other women. So that's why I'm also so passionate about women supporting each other rather than competing. So I had the event go to charities that I just knew were really making a difference, that were 501c3, but at the same time, bringing women into the space without name tags, without, hi, I'm so-and-so, this is what I do, more, hi, my name is whatever, and this is what I care about. Like, that was the environment that I wanted to create. And from there, it's just grown, and I've given myself permission to evolve. Like I said, I just wrote my first book, Beautifully Brave. You know,
congratulations.
The book process.
Oh, yes. It's a lot of work. So how far are you in the book process?
So it's out. It released in maybe, because everything going on at the release date, I don't know if this happened to you, kept getting pushed.
Yeah, everything changed a little bit, yes.
And you know, in the book world, that usually doesn't happen. You have your release date, and that is the date that the book
that they stick out to. Yeah. Shame. So you had a couple of pushes with that.
Yeah. So it's been out for a few months, and it hit bestselling on Amazon for women's health. And
oh, congratulations! Can you hold up the book? Because I don't have the book here, so that's amazing. Oh, that's wonderful. So people can get that wherever books are sold. So tell us about, obviously the book is your story, but tell us more about the book.
Yeah. So the book is called Beautifully Brave. It's an unconventional guide to owning your worth, cultivating self-love, and standing in your power. And for me, what I learned was just, because so many, at least speaking for me and the women that I work with, everyone's like, how do I get more confidence? Like, how do I?
That's the second person, sorry to interrupt you, it's the second person I've interviewed today and the third person this week that has spoken about that particular question becoming like it's a major thing. How do I get more confidence? And I get that question all the time. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Dive in.
And of course, with all of us, we all have different trauma. We all have different stories. There's no comparison between people's stories and trauma. But for me, I used to ask myself that question too, because for someone that had been silenced for so much of her life, I didn't have the confidence that like that 5-year-old girl had, where she knew exactly what she wanted to do and who she wanted to help. And so I wanted to, the reason I say an unconventional guide is because there's just different practices in there, like screaming into the pillow and like all these things that you could do to get energy out of your body. But I wanted to create a guide for women to realize that confidence is also a choice. And the more you love yourself, the more confident you are.
Oh, I can't agree with that more. And that goes totally hand in hand with our whole psychoneurobiology. So talk about some of these unconventional practices that you mention in your book.
Yeah. So for me, one of the things that it actually started with my first event that I was telling you about.
Yeah, that very first one.
Yeah, the very first one that even gave me the confidence to do that, because I had no idea what I was doing. And I also I hadn't processed or healed through something really big that had happened to me when I was 19. Like I hadn't processed that assault. So the way that I did that was I would visualize what the event would look like. I would visualize how people would feel, how I would feel. I was terrified of public speaking, but it was my event. They're like, you have to get on stage and say something.
And
I'm
talk,
like,
yeah.
yeah. Like, no, I just want women to meet each other. Like, I'll just say hi for a second. I would sweat thinking of speaking and speaking on stage, because when you're silenced and when things happen to you like that, it's like being seen is so terrifying. So at that moment in my life, I did not want to be seen. So I use visualization to heal and to also, change the story of things that have happened in my life. Like I do that with anything. I visualize, I'm sure you do this in your practice, like with EMDR, like I visualized it happening differently, who showed up for me in that moment. And so the chapter in the Science of Happiness is I just it's obviously more extensive, but I just share that process. Like I visualized myself on stage. I visualized how everyone in the room looked and how they were able to heal and how women were able to start like spreading this movement of women supporting women, which is now a viral hashtag. But at the time, people were like, what does women supporting women mean? So little things that you can do yourself. And I love marrying having your psychologist and having your own self-care practices and meditation. I just love marrying it all. And I talk about different ways to do it in the book, and also to discover what works best for you. Cause not just one step, like this 10 steps that I hand you, you might not like a few of the steps. So be able to like switch up the recipe, add your own steps in, and be empowered to do that.
That's incredible. So at this very first event, you started getting women to talk to each other, and you, instead of, as you said, the normal, put the name tag on, I'm this and I do this, you said, I care about. How did women respond? And what has happened? Why do you think, how did women respond? And why do you think this has happened? And why women have responded like this to what you're doing?
Yeah. So I will never forget watching like the first, you walked in the room of the event and there was like an outside area. Then you walked into the full event. But I was watching women as they walked in, the armor that they were wearing, because you're like, oh, you see all these women everywhere. She's so beautiful. Like my outfit, like, oh my gosh, I don't know anyone here. You see their instant reaction. And for me, I just, like I said, I visualized them then feeling so welcome, that there was some sort of energy there that they could let that armor off a little bit. And the way that I developed the event was I reverse engineer from how I wanted them to feel. And just every single detail of the event was thought like that. So I cannot tell you why it worked out, just the strong power of intention and visualization, because I watched them with that initial like fear of walking in, and then getting greeted and not having to put a name tag on and just having that energy in the room. I actually watched their armor disappear. And I think within the first 5 minutes of me actually standing up and literally overcoming a huge fear of mine and just being like, I am so nervous right now. Those were the first words out of my mouth, that women realize like, I don't need to put on like a different face right now. Like I can just come here and be in a beautiful environment. And then of course we did exercises and like really deep questions for you to just drop right in. So it just wasn't the small talk. And women were crying and connecting. And I think at least for that, I think that there's, and this is my experience, I think so many networking events and events in general were so like masculine, like, why am I here? What am I going to get out of it? Like, who am I going to be? Like, how much money am I going to make? That the energy of that event, you could just feel it was not like that. And that's where women get to come into like their feminine power. And it was just like an unspoken energy that more male dominated events, we don't get to like flourish in.
So you really got women to tap into their inner selves and to really tap into who they were, and for a moment to throw off all the veneer of who I should be and what I'm supposed to be and all the rules of society. And as you say that, the competition, we're just not created or structured for competition, and even we're structured for enhancement. And I teach this so much with my work as well, is that you enhance. Two waves underneath each other will grow versus they'll flatline. So competition flatlines. So it sounds to me like this is what you've managed to achieve amongst women, which is not an easy thing. And you said within 5 minutes. So that's quite amazing for people to drop that, because those women walked in, as you know, with all that armor on them, as you mentioned. And probably totally threatened about, that one's richer, that one's this one, that one, that one, I've got it, what can I, whatever their thinking was. That's a lot to drop in a few minutes. So your vulnerability seemed to be a key factor.
I think the vulnerability, the connection, and just the way that the room and the energy was set up. Because as you know, when it's all women in a room, and we love our men, I have so many, my husband's amazing, so many. So it's never like against any.
No, it's just
different. And I hadn't really experienced that before. And so I think a lot of the women attending hadn't experienced that before too. And at least for me, because as you know, going through all the things that I'd went through, I was not vulnerable. Like I was
built up a veneer of like such a huge amount of armor.
Yeah, so much armor. So as I dropped mine, and that's what I think in friendship and relationship, and as you drop your armor and you step in and show what you want to have, you'll give it and get it in return. So I think it was just that same exact thing with the event.
So it's interesting there what you're saying, that women actually, once they feel safe, they seem to feel safe quite quickly. Then it has this almost viral spread where one woman will let go, then everyone else feels safe to be able to share their vulnerabilities with each other and just rebuild and share and talk and connect. Is that what your events are basically? Is it what are they? Do they share? Do they talk? They do exercises?
Yeah.
And what does it look like now? How's it transition from that first event to now? And how
Thank you for asking. You'll have to come to one of the events. I know everyone will love you and be able to like share your gifts and just how amazing you are and what a difference that you make. So my last event, we obviously haven't had one for the last 2 years, was January 2019, and it was Girl Talk Festival. So it basically had gone from my first Girl Talk event, which was maybe like a 3-hour event, to a 3-day event. The first day, it's like what we're talking about, that armor. I realized, let's give people more of a day to drop in, and I'll also have like people that they know so that they can go to the second day with friends rather than on their own. Yeah. And then the second day is all personal development, like all the amazing things that we talk about and that you do on your pod, like all of that personal development, speakers, workshops, a lot of connecting. And then the next day is all just entrepreneurship, and for women to really be proud of and tap into whatever their gifts are and whatever they want to do, whether it's like starting a business or, starting something online, and just really getting support through the entrepreneurship on the last day.
Wow, that's wonderful. Now that entrepreneurship, that concept is not a new concept, but what I'm hearing you say, you've shifted the perception of what can I get out of you? Here's my business card. Who can you connect me with? To more of one of what can I do for you?
What can I do for you? Exactly. And what can we do together?
I love that. And that's the shift, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's totally different to what we have been experiencing, what we currently experience in our culture and our society. Okay, so that's one thing. And then I wanted to ask, what about the dominance? I know it's different now, for a little different, as you mentioned, but there's still quite a strong dominant patriarchal male dominated. We still live in a society that needs to develop a lot more. So how are you dealing with that? And did you find a lot of the women, or do you find that a lot of women are not functioning or not releasing their potential because they're suppressed by religion, culture? Okay, I see you smiling. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I do think that we have a long way to go. I think that there's so much. We've come so far and we have a long way to go. And what I know, what I can do, what I think that everyone can do is tap into what their gifts are. And the way that you tap into that is what brings you joy, what like really excites you, and where do you feel like the most in flow, and put your time and energy in that. And that's when that's when you see shifts within yourself, within your friend group, within your community. And I believe that even though we have a long way to go, if we as women continue to keep getting in these circles and having conversations like this and supporting each other and being like, I'd love to have you on my podcast, or I'd love to share your book, or if we start doing business like that more, I think that we just get stronger and stronger, because we don't have control over things outside of us. And we don't have control over, let's just call it like the masculine way of doing things. But if we become more confident and more clear and grounded in our feminine power, I think that rises above and is so strong. And if we just concentrate on that, and we don't allow that, like for me, for example, I just had almost taken on that competition and those comparison, that way of thinking, because that's what I heard my whole life. And so that's when I knew, like, I was out there, like, trying to fight, be an activist, do all the things. And I'm like, whoa, this needs to start with me first. And then let's like bring other women in, and how can I support you? What can we do together? So I think that the more we concentrate on that right now in this time, the faster and quicker things will start changing, because we'll be more in our power, and we'll also not be silenced. We'll turn to our left, we'll turn to our right, and we'll have 20 women there to support us and help us through it, rather than when so many of us turned to our left, turned to our right when I was 19. And I was like, oh, I don't have anyone to talk to.
There's no one there. Whereas here now, there's a whole culture of, and then it grows, because those 20 on either side have got 20 on either side of them. So you've got this exponential growth of starting from a grassroots movement. But as you quite rightly said, I love how you stress that it starts from inside yourself. You've that confidence, because if you're not, and I know as a scientist, for the work that I do, if whatever your identity would be the first thing that I work on with all my patients. So, and people would often say, how do I start healing? Well, you've got to start loving yourself. We all know that, but to know the science behind it. So just a little scientific fact, when you are helping another woman, or when you're encouraging each other, like we're doing now, or like you do with your woman in the events, it increases your intelligence and your wisdom. Whereas if you're competing, you drop your intelligence and your wisdom. And you think of it, you're trying to get ahead in life. You want all your intelligence, processing skills, wisdom, etc., to be firing. But the culture actually does the opposite. So it becomes so much more difficult to do it. So you're creating a space where people can flow and develop and grow their intelligence, which is fantastic. And you're obviously seeing the results.
Yeah, that's actually beautiful for you to explain it like that. Because I think, like, if you think just like back in like caveman days or something, like, men are competitive. Men are like, I want to go out and like hunt and do all these things. But like you said, like when women are in community and like, and that nurturing and like that power and helping each other, that's when our intelligence rises. And I think for so long that because this was led by the patriarchy, we were like almost getting those masculine ways of being put on us. That's not the healthiest, highest self and most intelligent that we see. So I love that we're in a place that people are starting to see that. And I love that you can actually explain that and show women the scientific backing on that. Because that really gave me chills.
Oh, well, you doing it, you're actually making it happen. And it's so vital for our growth, as you explaining. If you think of it like competition and having the armor up and trying to defeat someone else, when you need other people, you need the deep, meaningful connections. Look at society. It hasn't worked. That patriarchal, male dominant, even the women that adopt that kind of philosophy because of just not their fault, because of culture and society, it hasn't worked, has it, Sarah? I mean, it's actually just created terrible problems. But when we come together, there's, so it's really to try and grow that. And we've got to remember the seed is sown. We've got to keep reminding ourselves of how it was maybe 50 years ago compared to now, and think, how will it be in 50 years? How will our next generation, my daughters are all in their 20s, between 20 and 30, and they're so different there's just no ways that they would even be anything like what my grandmother or even my mother was towards, I would grow up with having conversations with my mom saying, well, that's a male's job. And I remember saying to her, but why? I was always kind of swimming upstream. And, that was, well, that's what women do. Those conversations we don't have to have anymore. They're going out the door. That's not what women do. It's not right. We've got to really... And you're creating a whole culture around that, which is incredible. So, okay. I mean, I'm excited for what you're doing. So I've got so many notes that I want to. You haven't even touched on them because you just dived in. You love talking about the psychology behind confidence, and you basically. But I would love to just dive a little bit more into. You mentioned science of happiness, and obviously you've gone into a bit of with your training and your background, the science of confidence. Can you talk a little bit more, because my audience loves science? So just bring in a little bit of that science stuff, and maybe another tip or a tool to take people through, just to leave them with something that they could, start moving forward in this more open-minded direction of enhancement and women connecting in a deep, meaningful way.
Yeah. So it's the same thing that you said, like when we actually reach out and bring other people along, and we're using that part of our brain that's like healthy, how can I help you? That is the same thing with confidence. If you're using that part of your brain of, okay, how do I get to love myself? What do I need to do right now in this moment to love myself or make my body feel good or learn something? That actually will show and signal to your body that you're going to show up for it. So for me, I realized with with confidence and also the science behind it, it was like, I say I'm going to work out tomorrow, and then I wake up and I don't want to work out anymore. Okay, what are you telling yourself? It's just the same way with your relationship. Your friend tells you, hey, we're going to go to lunch, and they always cancel on you. How do you feel towards them? What's the energy towards them? What is your brain signal towards them? Like, that's the same with how you feel about yourself. So if you tell yourself you're going to do something and you're not doing it, you're taking trust away from yourself. And therefore, you don't trust yourself. So how would you be able to have confidence? How would you be able to have confidence in yourself? So everyone always says it's so hard and almost intangible to like, what is self-love and what, like, how do you have it? And how do you get it? And all these things. And it's not like something that you get and you have, it's something that have a relationship with yourself for your entire life that you're always working on. So for me, I'm like, oh, the way that I could have self-confidence, and this is tangible, is if I actually show up for myself. If I actually say and do the things that I'm going to do, I keep my word to myself. I go and get a massage or go and get body work that I was supposed to do, or I go on that walk. It's, you are a human being. It'd be the same thing as if you leave a plant and you don't water it and you don't talk to it and you just pass it by, it's going to die. If you just leave yourself and you're just focused on other people all the time and not nurturing yourself, what's going to happen to you? But if you're nurturing yourself all the time, watering yourself, listening to yourself, that's when you're just like, oh, I absolutely love myself. I feel so good in my body. I feel sharp and intelligent. Every day is different. But for me, it's just like, of course, that was like an aha, duh moment where that is where confidence comes from.
I absolutely love that. I love the word that the fact that you use the word trust. That's really brilliant, because that, do we trust ourselves? It's just such a simple example that you've given of, you promise something to do something and then you don't do it. It's towards yourself, because your mind drives your brain and your body, and you've got your messy mind and you've got your wise mind, and you allow your messy mind to dominate, and there is a trust that's broken within yourself. And that definitely would take your confidence away, because you've got to believe in yourself to be able to do anything. So it's that we always talk about someone who's, I think of that phrase, if you say someone's confident, what is generally the sentence that goes after that? It's generally something along the lines of, they're just so confident in themselves. They're so, no matter what, it's just oozing out of them. So it's coming from inside of ourselves, and we're wired for love, and we're wired for optimism bias, and we've got this whole mind-brain-body connection that drives us in that direction. And so the trust aspect is absolutely vital. I love that you said that. That's really, really fantastic. And it's primary in order to be able to, for us to move forward. So that's great. So do you have an exercise or a tip or anything that people can start, they must get your book, and that's really, you've got a lot in there, and they can follow you obviously on Facebook, and we'll get all that in a moment, and on Instagram. But is there something that, if you had to give someone a pearl of wisdom now who's really thinking, okay, but I get this and I get that and it makes sense, but how do I actually start trusting myself? You gave one example of the workout thing. I think that's fantastic, but let's take that maybe a little bit deeper, because I think that's a really, really excellent point that you've made. The trusting of yourself, that's deep. Let's talk more about that, and because I think sometimes maybe we gloss over this. I like that. I'd like to dive a little deeper into trusting yourself.
So in terms of trusting yourself, I think the awareness of it is so huge. So if you're listening right now and you're like, oh, do I trust myself? Do I say what I'm going to do? Just the awareness of that when you go out throughout your day, even what you're saying to other people, or even when you're scheduling things and putting things on your calendar and you're like, oh, I don't really want to do that, but I'm going to put it on and I'll just, I'll do it later. Start thinking about it in terms of being really intentional just for like the next couple of days. Take a little inventory and give yourself a little score. Like everything you're about to plan, everything you say that you're going to do, when you say it or when you're about to say it, take some inventory of, do I want to do this? Do I plan to do this? And then keep track of if you did follow through. Don't shame yourself, but just kind of get like a little grasp of where you're at in that department. And then just start empowering yourself to be like, I'm not going to say that I'm going to do something that I know that I'm not going to do. Or if it's something like a workout and you're like, but that's actually really, really good for me. So what kind of workout? That's where you go into the second step of like, what kind of workout what kind of thing could I do for my body that I would actually want to show up at? Just like getting to know yourself again, almost like dating yourself, being friends with yourself. So I like to take a little inventory of where you're at, figure out then how you can have it work for you so that you're not letting yourself down. And when you do those two things, you'll just start naturally feeling that trust and like almost the way that you love someone else in your life, you'll start like feeling that internally and you'll want to keep doing more of it. And then a third step, which you could start now, is I don't know if you do any journaling, but when I wake up in the morning, I know this is like some people are like, this is really basic, but when I wake up in the morning, I'll think of things that I'm grateful for. It doesn't have to be every single thing just to get that frequency going. And then I'll do at least 5 minutes of journaling. You could even do 2 minutes just to like write down like anything that's coming up, or maybe your whole to-do list is like in your way. Or you could use the time to write down what you want your day to look like and just start it like being more of the co-creator of your life rather than just letting like things happen to you and having like no say in it throughout your day.
There's a concept I've been researching for 38 years and developed a system called the neurocycle out of it. And it's basically the self-regulation, mind management. Talk about mind management and self-regulation. And in the neurocycle, the third and fourth step are two different types of journaling. So yes, I totally and utterly agree with you. There is so much value in doing that. And as you say, how you start the day is vital, because as you wake up, it sets the tone. And so those little things, but all of these things that you're saying are almost like little rewards that you're giving yourself as well. So it's the trusting, the self-care, the reward, because women are almost trained to, well, you just got to self-sacrifice. That's your role. A good woman does this, this, and this, runs after everyone else. This has just got to go, because you can't do that forever. You're going to become bitter, broken, twisted, and you cannot give when you are not self-loving, if you haven't set those self-love boundaries. So I'm glad that you've emphasized the reward, a little bit of, you didn't specifically say that word reward, but you said give yourself the time to do those, well done, and do those things, the massage, the body work, the time to read a great fiction book or whatever it may be, go for that walk in nature, whatever it is, because we don't allow ourselves to do that. When we do, we feel guilty. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you get it. I just get thousands of comments and direct messages and people in conferences saying to me that, yeah, but I don't have time for that. If you don't have time for that, you don't have time for anything else either, because everything else is going to be a half job and it's going to be so stressful for you.
Yeah. And you're basically saying, oh, I don't have time for you, to yourself. Imagine if you said that to your child or to a friend or to, I don't have time for you. You're literally.
Ouch, yeah. No, that's really good to look at it like that. Would you say that to your child? And so I think I'm so glad we've come to this level of consciousness where we are allowing ourselves so much more. So I do so many interviews like you probably do as well. And this conversation that you and I are having, I'm very pleased to say that it's happening so much more. 38 years ago when I started in the field, it was this, you wouldn't even dream of having a conversation like this. I was always like challenged for swimming upstream and that kind of stuff. So I want to just say thank you to you for pushing this boundary and really encouraging women, because once you let that flow go, it just spreads, doesn't it? And that's what so this is my last question. This spread of, you've got a hashtag that's gone viral. You've got these groups, you've reached so many women and it's multiplying. It's multiplying fast. Is it faster than what you actually anticipated? Or can you see that viral effect? You're just basically opening something that's natural, so that's why it's just spreading. You've opened something that should have been opened a long time ago, and you're helping it to facilitate the spread.
Yeah, I think it's that. I look back and I'm like, whoa, or I remember like planning my first event, but I think it's what you said. It's like, this is natural inside of us. We've just been taught an unnatural way. And now we're all getting back to our natural way and just supporting each other and really unlearning like a lot of crap that like we should have never been doing in the first place.
Exactly. And it's the unlearning that takes a little bit of time. And then it creates resistance from particularly maybe the elder people in our lives and our parents or religious communities. So here's my last question to you. There is resistance because you now are you're coming against a cultural norm. Mm-hmm. How have you dealt with that, and how do you have the ladies that you work with brought that kind of thing up to you about, gosh, now my husband's saying this, or the church is saying that, or my boss is thinking this, or I'm being told I'm this aggressive woman who's power hungry, or these terrible comments that come out of someone who's basically being themselves and being successful at being themselves, the negative reactions. Have you encountered that, and do you have any advice around that?
Yeah. So I have a whole journey with that, because when I was first starting my business, I was encountering that so much, especially like within my own family. And then you bring up all your like family triggers and you're like, oh, I'm not safe if I'm like But that was a whole, a whole other like
Whole other story, another whole conversation, how to deal with
Yeah.
that. We'll have to do it sometime.
Yeah, definitely. But for now, what I'm grateful for is that, like you said, we have a long way to go, but we're not looking over our shoulder and not finding anyone there. Now there's people there. There's other women to talk to. So it makes it easier. But I think that little trigger, or that am I doing something wrong, or I'm going to be called too much or bossy or abrasive, like you said, that's still there because that's what we've experienced either all of our lives or most of our life. So it's like, you're like rising up and doing something about it, but you're also like, there's a little voice inside, like, are you going to get in trouble for this? Or am I like, I come across it because now I'm going into like the tech industry. So I'm around more male energy now. So sometimes I'll catch myself being like, totally like clear to the point, exactly what I said. And then I'll get off and I'll be like, oh, they're going to think I'm being XYZ, or was that too aggressive? And then I'm like, wait, why am I still asking myself these questions? So it's just like part of the process.
So the thing to do there is to actually allow yourself to recognize what you did. You recognize that statement in yourself and recognize that that's not, you don't have to feel like that, that you don't have to pick up there. You don't have to reconform to be accepted by them. And that shift, whenever there's a shift, it's going to be a little bit painful, and to almost set that boundary of protection around yourself to be able to keep moving forward. So do a lot of women encounter this that you share with, that you work with?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I hear the most is just women feeling like that too much, like they've been told they're too much, or, like they dim it down a little bit, or you're being too loud, or, that outfit. And I think that pretty much every single woman that I meet, encounter, work with has experienced that. And still, even though that they know that that isn't the truth, they'll get those little voices like I shared.
So what do you tell them to do when they share that with you?
I think it's good that they share. I tell them that when you are feeling that, find that safe space to share it. And then also that you get to remind yourself that you know exactly like who you are, what you said, the place that it came from, and that we also get to stop second guessing ourselves and just have those safe spaces to be like, oh, that came up again, but I know that's not the truth. And for me, the thing that I tell a lot of my clients, and for anything, is just for when you have a safe space to share, because we've been silenced for so long or so scared of judgment, and just being able to share it and say it out loud and then be able to let it go is so huge.
That's so good, because as you said, for so many years, you experience that, you shove it down and you think you've done something wrong. Now you've added to your toxic levels, and that's damaging your brain and your body and all these things. You say, turn around, there's 20 here, there's 20 here, talk, get it out, process it, get more perspective, and that'll help you. This has been wonderful. I have loved this conversation. It's such an important conversation, and it's one that needs to be had a lot more often and dived into in a really deep way. And we've just really got to keep the momentum going. So I want to thank you for what you're doing, because I think it's very, very significant for the growth of the human race. We've got to really allow each and every one of us to really become who we are. So thank you for sharing that. How can people get hold of you and get hold of your book and find out more about you?
Yeah, well, thank you so much too, especially when you've been doing this for so long, when you were like the only one going upstream. So thank you. Thank you for being able to explain just the science, and for people to really understand that, for them to know like, oh, this really does make a difference. So I'm just so honored to be here and talk to you today. And I don't know if anyone can see, we're wearing the exact same color.
I know. Look at that.
We didn't plan it.
No, we didn't plan it, but it certainly worked.
Yes. But you can find Beautifully Brave anywhere books are sold. And you can follow me on Instagram, connect with me, send me a DM at Sarah Pendrick. I love connecting with people on Instagram.
Oh, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a lovely conversation, and such an important one, and so much fun. And keep doing what you're doing, and I look forward to connecting again.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.